Hi, Babushka. I hope everything is going well for you. You got a promotion, and I'm sure there's a lot on your mind. I'm sure there's a lot that you've been learning. Hang in there. And remember, the job that you have right now is more than essential. You're working with medicine, and you're helping all kinds of people from all walks of life during a time right now when the world needs it more than ever. I've been listening to Jim Croce. He's one of my favorites. He was also one of your great grandmother Esther's favorites. You know, the woman that I mentioned to you. You never knew her, unfortunately. But she was the mother of your grandmother Sarah. She admired his music, all kinds of good songs that came out, in the late 60s and early 70s really influenced my life. And he was a Capricorn like me. And get this, he was a truck driver. And he was still driving a truck and working so hard while he was singing and putting out his music. Unfortunately, he died at a young age, too young, but he left a legacy, and his wife and his children will never forget that the love that he left for them. Always good memories, you know? Always. Whenever I hear, I've got a name, I've got a name, it blows my mind away, 'cause it reminds me that I have a name and that I count, and so do you. Wonderful, wonderful woman you are. I have a lot to talk about here. I've been working really hard, as you have been, and as your husband Tombo has been too. I'm sure working lots of hours. His job has a lot of value as well, because he delivers packages and letters to everyone in the mail. And I know on the East Coast the weather is going to be dramatically changing. And you two are just going to keep on going and staying strong and doing your job. The weather has changed here too. It's starting to get dark and it's starting to rain. And the governor of the state of Washington has just enacted another lockdown for the state of Washington. Important, intense stuff. So I worked last night. We had an extra addition to the delivery, and I was willing to stay, but it was unnecessary, because now we formed a really good, strong team. We can count on each other, and that's good, especially for our lead, the fearless leader. And Mr. Hill, if you're out there, just wanted to say hello. Actually, during work last night, I managed to break a nail. I fixed it, and I'll get my nails done sometime next week. I don't know what color yet. But yes, I break a nail, and I work very hard, as are everybody who's working right now. And yeah, I wear a mask. I do. Last year, around this time, I actually contracted the COVID virus. And honey, I've told you about this. I went through it, and so did my roommate. We were both exposed. A lot of the people in the neighborhood had all the symptoms, every one of them. Before they even addressed on the national news what those symptoms actually were, they just kept changing the symptoms and then adding to it and then adding to it. I had already had the flu earlier that month. And then, all of a sudden, I get the hot feeling and the sweatiness, and my brain was almost delusional, and the aches and pains, and yeah, I'm going to be graphic here. I had the vomiting and all those other things that go with it. If it wasn't for my roommate and for Francis visiting, I don't know what I would have done. I knew something was intensely wrong, and Francis brought broth and Pedialyte and 7-Up and all kinds of good stuff for me. Extra honey, too. And saltine crackers, because he knew they would help my stomach settle. But because Francis is older than me, I didn't want him to catch this, even though he's very athletic for his age. I wouldn't let him come through the door. I had him set the bags down at the doorstep. I think it was a wise move. I do think, though, that he was exposed because nobody knew what was going on. All kinds of people, my coworkers meaning, they were calling out sick. And some of them, their diagnosis from the doctor was unknown virus. After a while, by March, we all put 2 and 2 together and talked about it, and we assessed the fact that we were probably exposed. And then at the store, I talked to all other kinds of workers, longshoremen, truck drivers, delivery people, hospital workers, even a doctor who lives in the neighborhood where I work that comes in on a regular basis, who happens to work the night shift like me. So they'll come into the store to get what they need before they go home. This doctor in particular was like, oh yeah, it goes beyond what they say in the news. They're still trying to figure stuff out. So, with this video, I want to address the importance of all workers out there. And, darling, the people that you know who live near you or work with you, that they should know the value of their labor. It goes beyond essential. And I think the paltry sum that the government has dished out, it's not good enough. And I think before this social disaster came about, and yes, it was a social disaster. You know, you can tie it with all kinds of conspiracies or guessing or flim-flam. But it was a social disaster that the system, you know, that's around us did not know how to address. Nothing like this has happened since World War I. But people out there who are working or who are not working or who want to work, especially too the ones who have small businesses who are struggling and may have or are in the risk of losing their business because of this calamity. I think people who are going to be really looking at this issue and really looking at the cards on the table, so to speak, are going to understand that we are all in this together. And that's the way things will progress. You'll see. Give it a couple of years. I've been reading, catching up actually, and revising on a wonderful writer that I admire. Let me grab one of the books for you. His name was Jack London. He wrote some wonderful stuff. My favorite of all his books is called The Sea Wolf. Wonderful, wonderful man. He was actually born in 1876. His real name was John Griffith, and unfortunately he died in 1916, and it was unfortunately due to medications that he was taking for a terrible illness. So sad. But he left a legacy of wonderful writing beyond The Call of the Wild. Within The Sea Wolf and some of his other writings, he addressed the importance of workers and how they're treated, and how it's important when they go on strike demanding better pay, better labor conditions, and all of those good things. The importance of standing together, and how, especially in poor economies, it can become a real fight. And he addressed, has some religious terms in it, and I know you don't like religion, and that's okay. Just think of it as examples, pieces of poetry he used to address how we deal with people who might help to or want to, for whatever reason, to bust or break the working class struggle. And remember, there's a famous quote out there, an injury to one is an injury to all. But he did a famous piece called The Ode to the Scab. Let me grab my glasses. I'm going to read it to you. I think you'll like it. After God had finished the rattlesnake, the toad, and the vampire, he had some awful substance left, to which he made a scab. A scab is a two-legged animal with a corkscrew soul, a waterlogged brain, and a combination backbone made of jelly and glue. Where others have hearts, he carries a tumor of rotten principles. When a scab comes down the street, men turn their backs, and angels weep in heaven, and the devil shuts the gates of hell to keep him out. No man has a right to scab. For betraying his master, he had character enough to hang himself. A scab hasn't. Esau sold his birthright for a mess of pottage. Judas Iscariot sold his Savior for 30 pieces of silver. Benedict Arnold sold his country for a promise of a commission in the British Army. The modern strike breaker sells his birthright, his country, his wife, his children, and his fellow men for an unfulfilled promise from his employer, trust, or corporation. Solidarity wins. Think about that. Now, that was written about 100 years ago or so. Remember, in history, right now, what we're living through right now is a grain of sand in an ocean of history. If you really think about it historically, it wasn't that long ago. It's just unfortunate that our elders who lived through the time period where this gentleman wrote this wonderful piece, It's unfortunate that they are gone. But if you dig deep enough, their struggle is there. Their legacy is there in documentation and also through wonderful writings like this. There's another gentleman I'd like to mention. I started studying him some time ago. A gentleman by the name of James P. Cannon. This is one of his books, Notebook of an Agitator. He was a true fighter in the working class struggle and could see things dialectically, how they all connect with each other. He was born around the same time period, actually, as Jack London, maybe a little later. I believe it was around 1890 or so. And he lived a very good, long life. He died in 1974. Well, I was 2 years old at the time. And he helped to organize men and women from all nationalities and walks of life and backgrounds. Important guy. I want to read one more important quote, and this is from James Cannon. Pride, anger, spite of any kind of subjectivity which influences a political course leads only to the defeat and destruction of those who give way to it. You know, in the prize-fighting profession, the manly art of self-defense, one of the first lessons the young boxer learns from the case-hardened trainer is to keep cool when facing the antagonist in the ring. And that's how I feel right now. Actually, I've been feeling that way since, I don't know, for the past 5 years or so. And that's okay. I'm going to stay strong and keep going. And anytime I have the opportunity of working overtime, I'm going to take it, along with learning more skills to make better videos. You know, it's always been my dream to do something artistic in my life. And there's nothing wrong with me, a proud working woman, to do something creative and artistic, especially as a gift to you and other people that are out there who are like you. There's nothing wrong with me wanting to share. Going back to your grandmother Esther, what a wonderful woman. She had been working since she was a young girl. And her husband, you know, your great-grandfather Edward, admired and loved her for that. Who would have thought this young girl, and I'll show you her photo again, her when she's a little girl with her Cupid doll, who grew up so poor, the oldest of her family, and she depended on hand-me-downs and help from other relatives in order to live a good life. Who would have thought she would have grown up so strong and resilient? There's a memory that I have. I was around 12 years old, and it'll stick with me, I think, for the rest of my life, and I think you should know this memory. So I was around 12 years old. I'm sitting in her kitchen. And she had just worked her shift, and she was home sitting at her little kitchen table, and she would always buff her nails and massage her hands because she worked in a factory. That was her way of relaxing. And I was sitting on a special kind of ladder stool. It's very popular. Your Aunt Jewel has it now, even though it's old and rickety. It was something special that we always would fight each other as kids to have the opportunity to sit on, because you could sit up a little bit higher with the adults and really communicate with them. Well, I was sitting on that ladder stool. Your Uncle Jack had paid a visit. He had gone to work, too, that day with Grandma. And he was visiting because he was arguing with her about not wanting to join the union there at the factory where she worked. She got him that job. She went out of her way to help get him hired for the summer so he could make a little bit of extra money, save up for a car, save up for college, and use that money too toward his football career. But he didn't want to join the union at the time. And in order to work there, there was a reason why they had a rule called closed shop. Means you have to join the union. That's part of the deal. It's in their contract. And that's how they had wonderful benefits, including really good health care. Better than what one would get at a job without a union contract, and then to earn certain wages so that everybody stays on the same level and that there's no favoritism played. Well, your grandmother, she put her foot down at him right in front of me, and she said, "How dare you? This is part of the job, to have a strong union. And if you're not going to join, then you just better quit and go now, because that's part of the deal." It taught me a lot what she said at that time, and I'll never forget it. It stayed in my mind as the importance of people working together and fighting together. See, that was part of her history. She was of a generation, as I said, she grew up poor. She wasn't the only one. It was a tragic time during her childhood and her teenage years. And this was also pre-World War II. There wasn't, at that time, Social Security or SSI or LNI to help out families during another social crisis caused by, dog-eat-dog system of capitalism and the stock market crash. She physically and told me little memories, and I've had other people tell me that they remember seeing families being thrown out on the streets, and also people, including women and children, being forced to work in workhouses, or children, if their families did not have the means of taking care of them, being forced into orphanages, things like that, and what have you. So those memories left a real long-standing impression on her. And she was part of those women, like this puppet here, who had a lot of strength and stamina and courage. And it left a mark on me. And I hope, me talking to you like I am right now, that it leaves a mark on you too. I know where you work, it's non-union, and that's okay. Because I think union, non-union, contracts, it doesn't matter. We have to remember that we're all in this together, right? And we stay strong and help out each other. These are trying times, and maybe you've had the experience now of seeing customers who are frustrated and sad. You know, it could be that they're demoralized or a combination of that. Or maybe they have lost hope. And I know you're getting good training and you're learning from good people. And you might bump into some co-workers, you know, where they might be toxic, you know, or full of flim-flam. Just smile. In your mind, you can offer them a hug. But you stay focused. You know how to. Stay on the straight and narrow and stay strong. And I know the job you have now is going to make a positive influence in people's lives. As you get more skilled at it and become better and better every day, you're going to touch people's hearts. Just remember that. I know you touch mine. Well, I better wrap up this video. And I miss you, and I'm making something special for you. And I'll send it to you for the holidays coming up. Tell your husband, Tombo, I love him too. And I'll talk to you later, sweetheart. Take care. And don't forget to ring the bell for me. Love you so much. Bye-bye now.